What? Soul is a kid diddler.
Nah, on God, bro, you gotta fix that shit. Why did your friend call you the Diddy Monster in your Discord server?
Bro, that's it. I've experimented with different kinds of video games in the span between this video and the last video that I've uploaded, so it's been a long time. I've been missing a bunch of them to review, but I want to let them slide for the time being. What really matters right now are games that have caught my attention, especially last year where we have met a plethora of them to try for ourselves. We had Expedition 33 where I finished the game ages ago. It was a great game, but it was depressing as shit. There are also games considered friend slop like Peak and Repo. Those were really fun to dive into if you have friends, in case I do, but if you don't, I recommend finding randoms and experiment. Just like any other hobby that creates itself a library of content for you to explore, you must experiment with that. And so, what game last year piqued my interest the most, actually? It was a video game that I was familiar with, having some merit on its previous installments. This is a game that, speaking of experimenting, encourages its players to progress and learn throughout their playtime hours. It is also about optimizing what weapons to choose, the armor that you wear, and especially combining all together to create the best experience to hunt a monster. So, what is this game in question? Well, viewers, welcome to the world of Monster Hunter Wilds. Like all of the previous installments of the Monster Hunter series, you take control of your hunter, and in Wilds, you are assigned to explore the Forbidden Lands, presumably being uninhabitable, with a bunch of biomes and an ecosystem for your hunter and many others that have embarked on this journey to learn and explore. Your job as part of the Hunters Guild, and just like the other games, your sole purpose is to hunt or capture monsters that threaten the ecosystem in some sort. For reference, such as Monster Hunter World, the guild finds a large monster named Deviljho. It is a threat to the ecosystem because its insanely fast metabolism can never satiate this monster's hunger. No matter if it chows down, let's say, a Tobikadachi or a Rathalos, that this fuck-ass pickle hopes to stay full, but it won't because it will forever remain how the internet puts it: a fat fucking chud.
I'm not gonna lie, bruh. Fat bitches need to shut up.
In return, though, you craft weapons and armors from monsters you have slain. You get their tail, you get their scales, or part of their jaws. Now, back to the topic at hand with Wilds' case, the story builds its foundation slowly, introducing different kinds of monsters and how they behave in certain areas, while also revealing that there was an ancient civilization that maintained the ecosystem we uncharted. We come to the conclusion that all of the habitats we encounter are held by a structure called Landspine, and inside this weird structure holds wyvern milk. So now you're wondering where this milk comes from. It comes from a man-made artifact called Dragon Torch, playing an important role as a source of power to not only the technology that the Wyverians had constructed in the past, but it's also a fuel for the ecosystem. Additionally, this Dragon Torch led to the creation of artificial monsters to defend Wyveria. It is quite weird considering that Wyverians basically carried the entire fucking environment using man-made milk. Okay, that sounds disgusting. But it's fascinating to see that an artifact can power a multitude of habitats in the vicinity, and this begs a question on what led its downfall. Look, I'm not going through its lore right now. I'm not gonna read all that. It will take a long time for me to cover because right now I want to give feedback to the plot. The game's progression feels tight. What I mean by this is that throughout my time spent on this game, that the story feels rushed. I believe that veterans would relate that it can feel like it's quicker in comparison to previous games like Monster Hunter World, Monster Hunter Rise, and Sunbreak DLC. This means that the monsters we encounter do not feel as menacing as how characters would portray them, and sometimes we as the player aren't curious to learn about these monsters in the story after the fact. After all, this is a base game, and future updates will come by as of this video, so opinions on this may vary. Now, the plot isn't overwhelming, which introduces new players and veterans alike to hop into a game without switching their brains on and having to lock the fuck in with each missions. Yes, I did mention that the story feels rushed, but but at the same time, we also need to consider that it doesn't give us a bombardment of exposition or info dumping. It's nice that the Monster Hunter series invites an audience and welcomes it with open arms, and Monster Hunter Wilds is no stranger to this. Through my own perspective as an experienced hunter myself, but not even close to a veteran, you are more than welcome to view the lore whenever you like without it feeling like a chore. And when you do, it's amazing to discover details of the world building that perhaps fans may overlook. And this encourages a sense of exploration, and the entire world of Monster Hunter breathes life. Now then, gameplay-wise, the premise is already simple. You prepare for a hunt, you capture or kill a monster. As simple as that. It has already been established in the series already, but one thing for certain is that some veterans will critique it as a different game than the rest. So, let's explore the gameplay and figure out why this is the case. For starters, the game allows you to select one of 14 weapons. You have Greatsword, Sword and Shield, Dual Blades, Longsword, Hammer, Hunting Horn, Lance Gun, Lance, Switch Axe, Charge Blade, Insect Glaive, Bow, Light Bow Gun, and Heavy Bow Gun. Each and every weapon is catered to different playstyles. Alma, who is your fine handler at the start of the game, will provide you a few questions to determine your specific needs. Sometimes it isn't accurate and you don't have to go through what she suggests, but here is how I define what playstyle I'll be running without Alma's guidance. If you play offensively, go with heavy weapons. If you play defensively, go with weapons that provide you a way to guard yourself from attacks, such as Lance. If you play offensively but you hate the lack of mobility, like a Greatsword, go with weapons that encourage you to push further into the field, like Dual Blades. If you want mobility, try Insect Glaive. Or if you just want to fuck off and jack off. If you want the jack of all trades and you don't want to assess thoroughly what weapons cater to your playstyle, a lot of newbies lean towards Sword and Shield. One of the basic weapons, but also a fun way to learn how the game truly works. So, I can actually talk about the combat in this game since I've mentioned Sword and Shield. I will be using this weapon as a display of different kinds of playstyle that people can experiment with. With this particular weapon, the weapon teaches you two things: offense and defense. While it is once again a basic weapon, Sword and Shield teaches you there is also mobility, where for a certain moveset you can slide and attack. Some new players have the assumption that Sword and Shield prioritizes on defense and defense alone. By this logic, all 14 weapons are restricted to either offense or defense, and there is no in between. That is incorrect, by the way. In light of this, Monster Hunter Wilds does not conform to whether a weapon can exclusively be used as an offense or a defense. What I mean by this is that you can use Lance and be on the offensive side, or use a Charge Blade but play defensively. The caveat to this kind of behavior is that if you are playing to fight against a specific monster, let's say Omega Planetus from Final Fantasy, yes, Omega is in the game, yes, you have to play a role whether you are DPS, tank, or support if you are going to be efficient in defeating a boss like Omega. Otherwise, as far as I can tell, confining yourself in roles doesn't typically matter in an average session.
Alright, bitch! Alright, Bob? Alright, let me use this shit. Bob! Alright, one more time! Oh shit, it's gonna do its move. No! Foot swing!
Why am I flat ass so damn slow? Look at this shit!
Want it!
I should have just stayed home. Why didn't we just throw a bucket of water at this Ajaracon and call it a day? Fuck, man. My ass hurts from getting fucked over by this Ajaracon! And now it's gonna slam its whole body on me! How am I supposed to survive this? Oh, fuck!
Your group chat been fucking leaked. Holy shit, bro. Weezy out of here.
All weapons come with a sharpness level, and the more you use them in a fight, the less sharp it will be. For beginners, green sharpness represents that it's in good shape, yellow is alright to use, but you deal lesser damage against harder parts of a monster, staggering you momentarily. Orange is a concerning level, and even Alma told me to use a whetstone. Red is the area that deals the least damage, and if you haven't noticed it by now, then I'm kind of surprised. So, this leads to monsters having different attributes as you encounter more down the line, and the game becomes challenging if you are not prepared. So this introduces us to new information, that there are elements for weapons that you craft. The best part about facing different kinds of them is the fact that we have guides. These guides are your way of studying what monster is weak or nullified to. Have an example here. A monster named Rumpompolo is weak to water, but a monster named Duna is not. However, Duna is weak to thunder. As you continue to understand what monster you're hunting, it is crucial to build weapons that work well against them. And to do that, you need to navigate through a thing called weapon tree. Each tree represents the monsters you have slain, and most of these trees will unlock new weapons that have different stats and different elements. If you hunt down a few monsters that are unfamiliar, then you can potentially unlock their weapon, but mind you that it can be locked through a couple of other weapons that you haven't crafted beforehand, or that you haven't discovered other ingredients to unlock it. In other words, certain weapons tasks you to hunt down Monster 1, craft their weapon before you can upgrade it from Monster 2's parts. Back to the topic, it is also crucial to craft armor meant to resist said monster's attack and bring items that may be important to you. Like potions, well done steak, demon powder, and hardshell powder, there are different items that you can choose and optimize them to create loadouts for certain monsters. Because if you walked up to, let's say, Gormagala, and your weapon of choice has a water element, how long are you going to compete against this monster in which they don't react to water at all? And Gormagala inflicts any effect called Frenzy Virus. If you don't have an item called Nullberry, which cures any elemental blights or ailments that have been inflicted upon you, you're kinda fucked if you don't bring that, unless you're a veteran player and you don't need all that. The game doesn't have to force you to use other elements, but for you to defeat them in under a time limit, by the way, you kinda have to be efficient. But then again, the time limit on this thing gives you enough to complete the task. Now, there is something that I've forgotten to add upon reviewing this game, and it's that Capcom introduced a new game mechanic that previous games haven't implemented, and it's called wounding. Depending how much you inflict damage for a period of time, a monster will reveal a wound, and you must spot that with focus mode, where it will be glowing red or even blue for guardian monsters. Attacking the wound with a specific attack will allow you to inflict more damage, potentially stunning your monsters and downing them momentarily. In my opinion, I love this new mechanic. It gives you leverage against your opponent, and even to the point where you can stop them from making a move because you inflicted their wounds. At one point, a monster was about to use a sweeping attack, but in time, I spotted one and damaged it, interrupting their animation. Alright, lastly, and this should also not be excluded, one very important mechanic that everyone should know is that a hunter never hunts with an empty stomach. That's why, before you hunt down a monster, you must have
fufu with naan bread and
You're a twink. I can totally tell.
some kunai.
I take it back a little reaction, I'm right. I totally get it.
And also that meat I want into my mouth. Oil that shit up.
You know, it kinda sucks as of this video, there's no cookbook from Monster Hunter. Never thought about that until now. Anyways, food gives you health, stamina, and some buffs that give you benefits. While my playthrough varied, I generally paid attention to ingredients that gave me a health boost upon healing myself, and ingredients that helped me decrease damage taken significantly. However, should it be an enemy that would give me a hard time, I'd focus on foods that give me defense or element resistances. Now, all the food buffs that you eat lasts around 30 minutes to even an hour, depending what ingredients you put in. So, let's try and dumb it down to the basics of this gameplay. Find a monster. Make preparations to fight the monster. Eat fufu and naan bread. Fight the monster. Craft weapons and armor for the next monster. And repeat. But outside of that, you are more than welcome to also capture endemic life for the Hunters Guild, or just explore a bit if you wish. There's also fishing, which is also awesome. Overall, with gameplay, in my opinion, it's really fun. You get to understand the game mechanics, the game encourages you to master your skills, and it doesn't feel as though the game is too hard, which leads me to the next topic. If Monster Hunter Wilds isn't too hard, then this might feel too easy. And that's why this feels like an issue. So this is probably my first time reviewing a game where I would have to address issues. I find that Monster Hunter Wilds is a fun game for newcomers, but I'm certain that veterans and even the experienced hunters had a rough time adjusting to this recent game. Sure, it may be too easy as stated in my previous topic, but I want to get to the most important issue. First point, this is for the average person who experienced technical issues, specifically performance issues. Monster Hunter Wilds does not perform well even on high-end computers. Even as of Title Update 4, people still suffer. Now, I will list my components on display right now for the computer nerds out there, and you guys can figure out if I'm tweaking or my computer is tweaking. Anyways, a prime example of the lack of optimization is where in some areas such as Windward Plains, where it has high vegetation, that my frame rate starts to drop noticeably until I look away from the field that it appears fine. The graphical settings had been determined by the game and it was set to high preset. And I must be tripping because at first it was on high, but then when the game crashed, it decided to push me into medium preset? What the Fuck! And I find myself concerned with the Monster Hunter community entirely. There has been a debate on how to solve this performance issue, and one of their solutions is to upgrade your PC parts. Some even overlooked the fact that there are players who have high-end specs but have graphical issues. In my honest opinion, that most, if not any game should be optimized for everyone for further engagement, attain far reach for new players. However, what should not be a practice in the video game industry is deliberately restricting accessibility for gamers. If a game were to bottleneck your computer, what is the certainty that even if you were to upgrade it, that it would presumably be optimized? And Monster Hunter Wilds is a prime example of uncertainty of satisfaction. In this example, for people to enjoy the game fully, they might have to decide on which computer parts they have to buy to cater to the recommended components that Capcom had listed on Steam. For me, I'm completely fine with having medium graphics. I don't mind hitting the minimum requirements. Hell, I don't care about what the game recommends. I'm more upset that loyal gamers to this title have to resolve into either buying components where it's unnecessary or having to sacrifice the quality in graphics in the hopes that the game maintains consistency. I'm not talking about just graphics alone, we're talking about frame rates that disrupt the player's immersive experience in the world of Monster Hunter Wilds. And here's the thing, through my own experience, even in medium graphics, that my game crashes. So no matter if I were to set it to high or even low graphics, that I end up crashing and it ruins the experience. For this, I say it's immoral. It's immoral that companies can get away with profiting off of a game that not only feels rushed, but it's also terrible in practice for a PC gamer to second guess if the high-end computer part would certainly fix the issue if the product does not present itself as a service worth buying for. The second point is that people may find this game easy. Feel free to comment about it down in the video. I'm not considering the rank 100 monsters like the Temperate monsters or the Savage Omega Planetus. I want to consider the general experience through the view of a newcomer. I see this as an invitation for new players to try a Monster Hunter game. There's no assumption to this. It's a fact that they don't know how to hunt a monster with proper equipment, and that's completely fine. It's all about learning at the end of the day. What experienced and veteran hunters alike see in Monster Hunter Wilds is that they are rewarded easily for slaying a monster, to the point people argue that they have completed the armor set of the said monster within a few hunts. It may honestly come off as a biased view, as these types of players already know the ins and outs of the Monster Hunter series. But what stands correct with these types of players is that the game holds your hand. Automatic traveling with your sacred, the scout flies that tell you exactly where to go, where the monster is, and this feels like being treated like we're babies. And it's also a practice in design in video games where, an example of this, God of War Ragnarok, that Atreus keeps telling you the clues all the time to where to go or what to do, even when there is a yellow paint on the cliff signifying you should be fucking climbing that. There's also one thing that Monster Hunter Wilds did not transfer from a previous game mechanic, and it's having to investigate traces of a monster. I'm not talking about what the current game has with starting investigation. No, this particular game mechanic had made me feel like I was doing something. Monster Hunter World was widely known for this and was the core gameplay. This gameplay allowed you to roam around and investigate random traces that monsters have left, feeling like you were hunting down a monster with purpose. Whether they left scratch marks or footprints, eventually when you explore the area deep enough, these clues end up finding where the monster is. And that sucked that Monster Hunter Wilds does not encourage that. It wasn't the main attraction at all. It seems like scout flies were fucking omnipresent and they knew where the monster was at all times. This makes exploration so hollow despite it being a huge area to roam around, which now leads me to my final point. Capcom seems to not listen to its loyal gamers. Despite Title Update 4 and proclaims to have slightly fixed performance issues, they don't seem to receive feedback very well. They don't learn from what made their previous Monster Hunter games so good and what they had lacked. They didn't transfer old formulas and renew them, and sometimes this game gets stale. Don't get me wrong that the gameplay is fun, but when it comes to longevity that the series isn't unfamiliar with, Capcom seems to lack direction in how they could pull veterans into staying loyal to this video game. And honestly, some veterans can see this as a completely different game. It tries to branch out as much as possible to new players, but it seems like this game struggles to keep the consistency of its fan base. Now, let's head straight into conclusion here, viewers. Monster Hunter Wilds is no doubt a good game. It still follows the same formula where you hunt monsters, you wear them, you craft weapons out of them, but it never strays away from the idea of learning your monsters each time. It allows experimenting, it opens ways to utilize your weapons, and most importantly, that this game does not restrict your playstyle. However, as of Title Update 4, I don't think I would recommend this game. Whoa, hold up, I know. Usually I recommend people video games, but this is the first game I don't. Despite my playtime hours and I say it is fun, I don't recommend this game, mainly because of performance issues. If Capcom were to patch them up in later updates and for gamers to receive positive feedback because of it, I don't mind people trying this game for themselves. There are a few things that this game lacked that other previous games had, but for new players, it doesn't hurt to try Wilds. For now, I don't recommend this. Alright, so now here's a question for those who are already familiar with the series. Comment down below. Would you prefer new players to get into Monster Hunter World or Monster Hunter Wilds first? Anyways, see you later in the next video. Bye bye!
Drip candy all day, sip on drink and smoke hay. Third coast niggas don't play.